This is a recording of the Amud on Yud Ches Amud Aleph that I was not here for. And this will bring us now back to being live again. So again, the mission we discussed yesterday, the mission told us Misha Mesa Mutu Lafana Patim Kriyash from Tefillin. Somebody who has a Meis Nabach Leinu, and before them they pater in Kriyash Tefillin, Mikol Mitzvah Samus B'Torah. From all mitzvahs when they are in that state of haninus, they have to bury the body. Nesi Amita, we learned about the ones who carry the bed when the mita is on, and those that are switching with them before the mita, after the mita. The Gemara is focusing on starting from the two dots. Is mi shemesin mutulufanav patim mekresh mam and atfilam and atfilan kol mitzvah samush b'torah. Somebody has a person nebuch who passed away, and that from what it sounds like right now, it's mesa is mutulufanav. The mesa is dead before them, so that person is not required to say tefillah, to put on tefillin, to read the Shema, etc., or any mitzvahs in the Torah. So the Gemara says, as follows: Muta lefanov en v'she'ena muta lefanov loy. It sounds like a person is going to be chayav if the meis is not muta lefanov, because the Mishnah seems to be very clear. It's mi shemeis muta lefanov that you're pater, but if it's not muta lefanov, then it should be chayav. So, for example, what is an example of somebody would be Einu Mutal Lefanav? Let's say he's in a different town and he's now coming to because he got a word that his family member had passed away. So he's coming to town. So he's not Mutal. Mace is not Mutal Lefanav. It's not there. So mashma then that person would be chayiv in Kriyat Shema, Tefillin, etc. Says Umar, is that true? Does it depend on the physical proximity of the dead, of the deceased? Vermini ba'ask yostira. Mi shemesoi mutalefonov. Oichel b'bayis acher. If somebody has a person who passed away and they're in front of them, so then they should eat in a different home. V'meinli b'bayis acher. If they have no other place to eat a different home, so then oichel b'bayis chaveri. Then if he doesn't have a different home, she go to eat by a friend's house. Why? Because it's like Leg Rush to be eating in front of the dead. If he has no friends, homes to go to, he has no home, a different home to go to. So what should he do? Then he should make a mechitza, he should make a separation between him and the dead person. One if he has no ability to make even a mechitza, so he should turn his face at least that much to eat. So for any mesiv, the halacha is he's not supposed to be leaning. Right, as we know, hasebas at dercheres, it's a chashivas to do so. Ve'eno echel basar, he doesn't eat meat. Ve'eno shaytzi yayin, he doesn't eat meat, drink wine. Ve'eno mevarech, he doesn't bench. Ve'eno mevarech and mezamin, he doesn't make the bracha, the berachas hamaitzi, and he doesn't make a zimun. He doesn't say, even though it's daraisa, right? There's a fundamental difference between the bracha of Hamaitzi and the bracha of V'chalas Tavot V'irachto. Nevertheless, he's not making Hamaitzi, he's not being Mizamen. Ve'eno mevarchen alav, ve'em zamen alav, and no one is going to be making a bracha for him with regards to Hamaitzi or including him in Zimun. Part of Kriyat Shema, and that's Tefillin, we call Mrs. Samush B'Torah, he's part on everything, including Shema, Tefillin, and all the mitzvahs in the Torah. But on Shabbos, this person is Mesiv Eichel. He is able to lean and eat basar, v'shes yayin, u'mevarech, u'mezamen, u'varech alav, mezamen alav. He's able to, in fact, eat meat, drink wine, to make a berachas hamaitzi, make a zimun, and he's able to be included in zimun, etc. And this person is chayav in all the mitzvahs samush b'Torah. Shimon Gamliel says once he's chayav in these mitzvahs, he's chayav in all mitzvahs. So what's the difference between the two? The Gemara says, "This is nafkamina to the way Tanakama said it." When Tanakama said chayav b'chol mitzvahs samush b'Torah, Shimon Gamliel says chayav beil and chayav b'kulan. that there's a bit of a difference, even though it's seemingly the same, similar lashon. So the Gemara is saying that Rabbi Yochanan said Rabbi Gamliel holds the mitoich is chayv because you now chayv in all these various things on Shabbos. So nischayv cool and you chayv in everything. Meaning, we're saying according to Rabbi Shimon, you even on Ava will be chayiv and his duties of Oina on Shabbos. So, what does that leave us? Kotani Miha says the Gemara, Pater Mekriya Shema, Menatfil, Meklam Mitzvah Morish B'Torah. But we see that this Avel, this Oinin, is Pater in all the mitzvahs of the Torah. In other words, we said that this Meis Hemut Lefanav, what should he do? He should go eat in a different house. Right? What does it mean if he goes to eat in a different house? It means that his mace is not mutal in front of him. And we see that the halacha is going to be that he's pater in Kriya Shema, Tefillah, and Tefillin, and we call mitzvah samosh b'Torah. And what do we medai from our Mishnah? Misha Mason mutal lefanav is pater, but here, even though the mace is not mutal lefanav, he's eating in a different house. He's eating in his friend's house. He's eating somewhere else. Nevertheless, we're still saying he's pater. Why is he pater? It's not Mason mutal lefanav. For the Gemara, what we should do is translate the case. We're not talking about a situation like the way we just mentioned, but rather we're talking about a situation of a machzir panav. What's a machzir panav? The last case that we were talking about is somebody doesn't have a different house. He doesn't have a friend's house. So he doesn't have even a mechitza. So what does he do? He should turn around and eat that way. So we're talking about a situation of a machzir panav. When we are saying that his pater and Kriya Shema, Tefillah, etc., is only going on that case of Machzir Panav. In that situation, where he's turned around, so it's not quote unquote Mason Mutal Lefanav, now that's still Lefanav enough that he'll be pater. But agrees, says Rav Papa, that if he was eating in a different house, then it wouldn't be saying that he's pater, he would in fact be chayev. This whole entire brisa that's telling us that a person is going to be pater, Kriya Shema, Tefillin, etc. And Mikol Mitzvah Torah is only talking about, says Rav Papa, on that last case of the Mainloi Davar Last Mechitza Machzer Panav V'Oichel. That's it. That's the whole thing. So that's the whole thing. He's Machzer Panav V'Oichel. That's the only time he's pater. That means the rest of the time he's going to be Chai. When he's at a different person's house, it's not Mesa Mutal Lefanim anymore, or his own house, but a different house. Or mechitza, all those situations, not really lefanav, and therefore he'll be chayev, as we were medayek from the beginning of our Gemara, that the Mishnah said Misha Mesa mutal lefanav is part of it. If it's not mutal lefanav, then it will be chayev. So that is the first answer of the Gemara. That's what Papa's answer. Rashi disagrees. Rashi Amar Kevan Shem Mutal Alav Lekovroi. Rashi says since it's mutal on this person to bury the deceased, Kim Mutal Lefanav Dami. That's considered to be Mutal Lefanav, even if the person is not in front of them. It's nevertheless, if it's incumbent on them to bury them, then that's still considered Mutal Lefanav and will still be pater, even though they're not in the physical proximity. They're in a different house, a totally different area. Says the Gemara. Shenema, we have a raya to Rav Ashi, because the Pasuk tells us by Parshas Chaisor, Vayokom Avraham Alpnei Mesoi, right? V'daber l'cheichis limor, right? Avram got up from his dead, from Sarah, and he says to the Bnei Ches that he wants to be Ekor Meisi Milafanoi. So Sarah was over there. Avram got up. He went now to go talk to the Meches, Ephraim, and he did a whole haggling and negotiating with them in order to be able to sell the Mars Machpelah. But the lashon that Avram uses is Ekbor Meisim Lefanoi, that I can bury the mace from before me. The mace is not before him. Sarah is somewhere else. Nevertheless, says Rav Ashi, you see from here that even if the mace is not mutal lefanov actually, but since it's mutal on him to be involved and engaged in burying the dead, so that's considered mutal lefanov, and therefore would still be patering you up. So Rashi Amar Kevin shemutal alav lekover, since it's incumbent upon him to bury the dead, kimutal lefanov, that's considered mutal lefanov. Shneimar vayokom Avraham me'al pnei Mesoi. And then my Ekbar may seem Lefana. Plus, Avram got up from the mace, and then says he told Ephron and wants to bury the mace from before him. In other words, Kol Shman Shemuto of Lekover Kemuto Lefana Dami. So long as it's incumbent on him to bury the dead, that is considered sufficient to be considered Lefanov, and therefore they will be Pater. So now. So now we come back to the following. So according to the way Rav Ashi wants to learn, according to the Rav Ashi wants to learn, so Rashi explains, Rav Ashi Amar Lo Elama Kula Umasnisan Nami Afilu B'Vayis Acher Nami Patale the Kol Shemutal Olav Kaveri Kar Mutal Fanov. So Rashi is saying you say this big idea. The Mishnah that says Misha Mason Mutal Fanov didn't mean literally in front of them. It meant whomever it's incumbent on a person to bury, such a person's part in Kriyat Shema. Whether they're technically physically in front of them or not technically physically in front of them, that is nevertheless a p'tur. So then it comes out that in this bride that you wanted to bring down a Mishmei Mutter Lefanov, that he should eat in a different house, he should do all these various things. Just because he's going to be eating in a different house does not going to pater him up from burying the dead. He's still going to be pater. Why is he pater? And now the case that we're talking about when it says ve'ein mevarchim v'ein zamarim v'podim kriyashma v'tfilim v'tfilim kol mitzvahs v'morsh is going on the entirety of the case. It's going on everything. What do you mean it's going on everything? Because fundamentally, it's incumbent on the person to bury this dead person. So since it's incumbent upon Reuven to bury his deceased, wherever Reuven is, he's not located in the same house. He's located in a different town. It doesn't make a difference. The point is, since it's incumbent, then Reuven is going to be chayiv to bury this mace, so he's pater from all these various mitzvahs. So says the Gemara, the following understanding. This is the gedank according to Rav Ashi. Mesu en aval mishamer loy. So if somebody has somebody who's dead, right? And it's incumbent, it's his mace. He must bury them. So that situation, he'll be pater in Kriyat Shema. But Mishamra Mesa and Ava Mishamra Loy. But if he just has to watch him, in other words, we want to when somebody passes away, we pass along this halacha. We watch over them. We have a shmir. Why that? Because God forbid that should happen. Obviously, today with the refrigerators and the like, it's less likely than maybe it was in the olden days. But you can imagine the olden days without refrigerators to hold the dead, with the wild animals outside, etc. Who knows what would be coming? Looking effectively at a fresh carcass, this would be a total dishonoring of the body. So therefore we have Shemira. And the Gemara is now dashing what Rav Ashi said. Rav Ashi is saying that the whole word of the Mishnah and the Brachot of Mesa Mutal Lefanov is not a word in physical proximity. It's a word in who's chayiv in the kvura. You're chayiv in the kvura, that means you're pater in Shema. You're not chayiv in the kvura, then you're chayiv in Shema. And it doesn't make a difference where the body is. So says the Gemara, Meso ein, avol mishamar loy. Meso is going to be a situation where you're pater. It's your dead, and you have to bury them. Avol mishamar, you're just simply watching, but you don't actually have to be incumbent on you to bury them. So then you're not engaged in that aspect of it. You're not working out the final arrangements for this, the final honors, burial rites for this person. So then you would not be mechuyev. For the Gemara, is that true? Tanya, we have a brayse that Mishama Sameis Al B'Shenim Meisem Potter Mikresh Meretz Filim Meretz Filim. When we call Mrs. Amorish B'Torah, but nevertheless we still have another brayse that seems to suggest otherwise. The brayse seems to suggest that somebody who's just doing shmira, he's not his mate, he's not related, doesn't know they are from Adam, but he's doing shmira. They asked him to do shmira, so he's at the morgue, he's doing shmira, and what do you call the brayse is telling you that he's potter. So you see. It's not correct. It's not correct to say Mesim Mutal Afanav is referring to just being responsible. Even if it's not physically in your proximity, so long as you're responsible for it, then it's your obligation, and therefore you're pater in Shema. You see, not that way. You see, even Shmira, where somebody's just watching a mace, but doesn't actually have any incumbent on, there's no incumbency on the person to be burying them. So in that situation, you would think the person should be chayiv in Shema, even if the body's in front of him, and Evas was still saying it's potter. So the more answers as follows: Mishamroi afal pisha ene mesoi, mesoi afal pisha ene mishamroi. Right. What it's mashra is that what's in fact the halacha is that somebody who's watching the mace even though it's not his, it's not related, he's not incumbent on him to be burying the person, he's going to be pater. And Mesai, and the person has somebody who died, even though they're not here, they're not in the same proximity, Av Bishain and Mishamer, they're going to be pater. So that is the Gemara until here is essentially a further edification on the idea that Rav Ashi wanted this Rav Papa to say that Kevin Shemut alav l'kover kimut l'fanav dami. That the idea that so long as you have an incumbency to bury a person, then it's like it's muta l'fanav. And we're pointing out that while that maybe sound like that's true from Avram Avinu, it would be mashma that if it's not in that sense, mutal on you to be burying the person, but just mashamrei, then maybe you should be chayav. And yet we see mashamrei is potter. On that, the Gemara is answering, no, the Gemara is saying, in fact, yes, you're correct that that you'll be potter also by mashamrei. Mashamrei afbisha any mesa, mesa afbisha any mashamrei. Says the Gemara that in fact that would still now require some element of watching of taking care of a mace, even if it's not coming upon you to actually bury them. So therefore, that would also result in a ptur from Kriyat Shema. Why? Because the person is actually in a mitzvah. Says the Gemara, Meser Mishamrei En. So the situation where somebody is either have a mace who's muta lefanov, in the sense that he's responsible, it's incumbent, or Mishamri is just watching a dead body, but it's not actually incumbent on him to bury them. So halachas, both those cases is pater. But somebody who's just walking in the Beis HaKvaris, he's not no mace there for him. He's not being misham or any dead body. He's just taking a stroll, a spatzir in the Beis HaKvaris. Such a person will, in fact, be chayiv and shema. For the Gemara, really? But we learned that somebody shouldn't go on a Beis HaKvaris or wearing tefillin or carrying Sefer Torah. It's totally not allowed. And if a person does he's over, what's that very he's over a pasuk in Mishnah that says loig l'rosh, right, is making fun of a poor person, which is by definition considered poor, is chayav aseh. They're being chayav from God. There's such a thing by making fun of such a person. So the Gemara is asking now that if tefillin and shema and all this is pater for mace, pater for if it's mace, mutal lefana, and we explained that also includes mishamrei. So, and we're saying by basic first, it's not mace, not mishamrei, not chayev. So, what if somebody goes to walk in a basic forest where it's not mace, not mishamrei? So we said over there that maybe if someone went to basic forest, it would be okay. He could say Shema, put on tefillin, etc. So must be you can't do that. It's true, it's not mason, it's not mashamrei, but it's another issue of loig the rush. Says the Gemara, it's a question of arba amas. If you're in the middle of a cemetery and you're within arba amas of the various graves, then you shouldn't be saying Kriya Shema, tefillin, etc. However, outside of the 4 amas of the mace, then it's not a problem. That is not a problem. Says the Gemara, the mace is teifis dalal amis around his grave for kriyashma, meaning that the person will not be responsible to say it. Mace teifis dalal amis for kriyashma. But when somebody's just walking based like forest, he's not within dalal amis of a mace, so then he will be responsible to say the Shema. So it comes out we have 2 different answers in the Gemara to this stira. One is the answer of Rav Papa, who says that the whole idea of a tour, when you're not in the physical proximity, is only going on in a situation when somebody turned his face around to eat. But that's not considered sufficient of not being in proximity. So therefore, that would still be considered made some mutal fun, and therefore that person would be required to take care of that would be considered lefanav, and the person would therefore be pater in saying the Shema. This is her Papa learned. According to Rav Ashi, no, it's a vart not so much in the physical proximity, but in who's incumbent on the burial. If it's incumbent on you to do the burial, then that's considered lefanav sufficiently that you'd be pater. If it's not incumbent upon you on the burial, then you would be chayiv. And the situation that we mentioned over here, in terms of like which house to be in, etc., all of it doesn't make a difference. So long as you are it's incumbent, it's a requirement of you to be burying the dead, so it doesn't make a difference how much physical proximity there is separating you. You nevertheless would still be potter. Just to point out, there's a long thesis here. Ve'enim mevarech. So it's quite a long thesis. Rashi had pointed out this is two aspects to mention in the thesis. The beginning of the thesis focuses on a line of Rashi. If you look at Rashi, the second to last line on Yudzanim and Beis, so Rashi says ve'enim mevarech. Ve'enei tzorich levarech berachas hamaitzi. He doesn't have to make hamaitzi. Thesis says, okay, but can he make hamaitzi? Thesis discusses this on both sides. Is there, even if you don't have to make hamaitzi, are you able to make hamaitzi? That's how people are mecham and the misses. They still want to make hamaitzi, even though they're avam. The last part of Tosfos, I'm skipping sort of the top of his cast, but the last third of the Tosfos. So Tosfos deals with a situation of like when does aninus actually start, right? What exactly is the aninus? When is a person going to be considered an einin or not? So Tosfos mentioned what happens if a person passed away. Now, he passed away in jail. And the Moshe is not letting the Jewish community bury the person. We have this famous example of Marat Rutenberg, who was taken, and then the emperor would not release him, whoever the king was, they wouldn't release him until I think it was about 7 years afterwards, when some wealthy Jew paid a lot in order to give the Marat Rutenberg a proper burial. So, in a situation where a person died in jail, right? And if the Moshe is not letting you bury them, so the text says you're not chayav in aninus. Why? Because how could there be aninus to tell you that you're going to be part of all the mitzvahs when the Moshe is not letting you have the body? These unfortunate, these terrible tastes came out in October 7th, and you had so many people who had passed away. People are being held in Gaza. Is the family in Avelis or not? Are they in Aninus or not? So Tesis is saying it depends on the situation. If a person is in a situation where the deceased bear is languishing in the dungeon and they died there, and the marshal is not letting the family bury the deceased, so near she'en chayav l'noig b'aninus, and maybe not chayav in aninus. Why? Meaning, and therefore you wouldn't be part in all the mitzvahs. Why? Near she'en chayav l'noig b'aninus shari ein zeh mutal alav l'cover, because it's not incumbent on you to bury him. What's the way you're going to be potter and Shema and Shema Esrei and all these things? Either because Mesa Mutal Fanav, but either because the mace is incumbent on you to bury them, or it's literally mutal lefanov and you're watching them or something like that. But in this situation where the mace is not mutal lefanov, you're not being shemrim, it's being held. The mace is being held by the government. So then, in that situation, why is it says the Tosfos that you should have aninas? It's not incumbent on anybody to bury him. They can't bury him. In fact. Because the government usually wants to pay off to be able to let out the deceased, and here they couldn't pay it. Continues the Tosfos. However, if they give up on burying, in other words, they stop petitioning the king, they stop trying to raise money in the various, campaigns, so they give up. And they're just going to let the body rot. They're going to let the body stay there. So then, if the then you become an avel. That's what Taylor says. You become an avel once you give up on being able to get the person out. So then you become an avel. Obviously, uh, the situation is not an ideal one, but nevertheless, you do not have to sit shiva if the body is being held by the Moshe who's not letting you have it. Then, since you're hoping for the better at some point, but it hasn't yet happened, so we do not practice aninus. If, however, a person gives up on the marshal ever being responsive, then there would be aninus, because then there'll be avelos, because then the person has then the person who is arrested, who's being held, is being given up on. So then the avelos would apply. Then the aninus would apply. So it says the Tosfos. So it says that again, if somebody has a Moshe who's holding a body, there's no aninus. because you're not mechuyev to bury him. Why? Because you can't be paid him. Um, and the Gemara, we bring them Sechus Mos, it says in Siyashu Bailam in the Kovrei, but once they give up on have a yish to be able to bury him, Mr. Avalon, then in fact do sit veils on the person. Possibly Torah Aninos, and then it would stop the Torah of Aninos, they would become an Avel. Miu Ba'esi Shetavsu Moshel, but with regards to somebody who the Moshel takes them away, Gam Avelos in a Chayev, but you're not Chayev on Avelos, Ledom in the Siyashu in the Kovrei, because that's not a situation. Um, it's not a situation where you give up on burying the person Shisham in a covers, right? Because you haven't yet uh, been going out to bury him. Wherever you still have hope that maybe you can work out an arrangement to cease fire, a deal, something with the Moshe, so then since you have that hope, then you do not get Avelus as yet. The Chaimaises of Elazar Rav Shimon Matzia, Taisus brings down the Gemara in Bava Metzia where Elazar Rav Shimon Pei Daled on the Beis there it says that he passed away and he wasn't buried for many years because of the fact that he had been a meister and the rabbis didn't want to bury him. So Rav Shimon Yochai came along and remonstrated on behalf of his son. So in such a situation, then you would be able. So then the question would be when they sat Shiva, when they had Hanidus, he wasn't buried for 20 plus years, or 18 years, I think the Gemara says, or even more than that. The Gemara wasn't 100% clear. Umaysa Shemesa Achoysa Shobin Tam Shabbos. The Mashma was a story where Rabbeinu Tam's sister passed away on Shabbos. So Shabbos, they told him that she was died and she lived in a different town. He had a normal meal. He had meat and wine. Why is that? He says, why would I be asked about yayin? I'm not in a situation where it's Mason Mutzal fun of. Why is that Mason Mutzal fun of? First of all, physically, she's not in that my proximity. Second of all, I'm not incumbent on me to bury her. She has a husband. He's incumbent to bury her. So Rabbi Tam had meat and wine. The Efsher Shagam, Rabbi Tam, maybe Texas adds on, maybe Rabbi Tam, if he was in that very city where the deceased was, meaning his sister, but her husband was there and taking care. Maybe the Rebbeinu Tam would consider that also a situation where he would be able to eat meat and drink wine. All right. See, this is the Gemara. So we're at Gufa. The Gemara says, Gufa hamishames hameis afish enim meisei part of mikreshma umenat tefillah atzmim kol hamitzvos ha'mors b'Torah. Somebody who's watching over a deceased, even though it's not his. In other words, he's doing a shmir. He's a nice guy. He went to the funeral home. He's doing a shmir over a body, but it's not his. It's not his family member. So he said, and the Brachot told us that even though it's not Mesa, it's part from Kriyas Shema Tefillah and Tefillah and Kol Mitzvos U'Mos B'Torah. Hayushnayim. What happens if there were two people? Zem Misham v'Zekar, Zem Misham v'Zekar. Then each one goes up. They take turns, like we do have the Gemara, right? We had the Gemara before. We had the Gemara before where the Gemara said that was the test. The Gemara told us about the situation where the Gemara said it was on Test Zion of base. The Gemara said that I'm trying to find the Gemara here, but if somebody passed away and they were what do you call it? They were digging a grave or being engaged with digging the grave. So if there was two people, then it would be no issue. Why would it be no issue? Because they could take turns. They could take turns. And the Gemara is, well, we just had it, and I'm still trying to find it. So the Gemara here is on Yudal Number Beis. The Gemara says, "Braysa Chayfer Kuch Lameis Bekever Potter Mikresh Min Tefillin Min Tefillin Min Tefillin Mekomas Samoris B'Tero Yes, my Krishma, Elav Netel, Yadam Nech Tfilin. The Kirk Krishma must spell Gufakasta the Gemara. It's a stira. Resham Patu Sefer Machayev, Halakash, but Shiv Resh Bechon. So you have one person, then it's fine. So again, the Gemara is telling us now, somebody who's watching over a dead person, even though it's not his mace, not a family member, not required to bury them. Nevertheless, it's Patu Krishma and Suman Salam, Kol Mitzvah Moshe B'Torah. How you Shnayim, if there were two people, Zemasham Zakir, Zemasham Zakir, then you could split up responsibilities and have each of them say the Shema. And they came on a boat. So they should leave the dead in one side and then down on the other side of the boat. What's the nafkamina? Ravina choshen la'achbarim. The nafkamina is if they are choshen for achbarim, for various different things to come along and potentially dishonor the mace. So they have a machlekes about whether or not you have to be choshesh for an achbar. The Tanakh Kama says you have to be choshesh for achbar even on a boat, and the other one says no. The other one says no. Um, Says the Gemara, some are worried about Achbaran, some are not worried. So if you're worried about Achbaran, so then you'll say you're Pater. If you're not worried about Achbaran, then you would say you are Chayev. On last Gemara, somebody who's carrying bones from place to place is going to bury them in a different town, so you shouldn't put them into like a saddlebag. And then to put them on top of the donkey, and then to ride on top of it. Because that's very, very bizarreness to the mace. When they listen, mutter. But if he's worried about goyim, he's worried about robbers, then mutter. Then would be mutter put in the saddlebag and to sit on it. The same way that we say it's okay about bones, so do we say it's also okay with Sefer Torah. Doesn't matter, hey, what's this going on either? If it's going on, the ratio is partial. Because Sefer Torah about somebody's is a Sefer Torah any worse than bones? Obviously, you can treat the Sefer Torah similarly. Ela Seifa is going rather on the Seifa. That is takes us here to the end. So somebody again has a malach, Thomas b'makal l'makal, and Arzei leinim diska, v'yidim al-gabach more b'yakiv alim, and they should never have many mizayin, v'misyar b'nei nachem, b'nei listen, mutter, v'cheder shem b'atzonis kacham b'sefer Torah, ahei. Ilim Aresha, if it's going on the Resha, the Hamelach Hatzas Makal Makal Arzei leinim diska, v'yidim al-gabach hamor. So that's Pashut. Why would Sefer Torah be any worse than bones? Elamai, it's going on the Seifa. What is it going on in the Seifa? That essentially, you don't need a chiddush on that to say that you're not going to put him in this kind of a thing. However, if it's a situation a person is afraid, then you could, and that's the chiddush is telling you about the fact that Sefer Torah as well is not going on the first part of this lesson, right? Of course, why would the Sefer Torah be treated any less? But it's talking about a situation where you're afraid of Nachem, you're afraid somebody's going to defile the dead, then you would be able to put the bones on the saddlebag. Have a wonderful day.